Stone walls and stained glass cast kaleidoscope shadows across Lord Edmund's face as he waited at the grand cathedral altar. Tapestries depicting ancient battles hung between flaming torches, while nobles whispered among themselves about his peculiar choice of bride, a political masterstroke, some called it. The powerful Earl of Westmere deigning to marry a commoner, cementing his reputation as a benevolent ruler. The massive oak doors groaned open. Edmund straightened his velvet doublet and practiced the benign smile he'd rehearsed for weeks. The veiled figure approached in measured steps, her simple white gown trailing behind her. As tradition dictated, the bride's veil was lifted. Edmund's practiced smile vanished. Those piercing amber eyes, he'd seen them before in the royal portrait of Avalonia's missing princess. Could the woman he agreed to marry as a political gesture truly be the heir to the very throne his family had sought to overthrow? 3 months earlier, Lord Edmund Westmere stood rigidly before the massive oak desk in his father's study. Duke Harrington of Westmere, a man whose presence commanded the room even while seated, examined a parchment through narrowed eyes. "You summoned me, father." Edmund maintained perfect posture, hands clasped behind his back. The Duke looked up, his silver-streaked beard catching the afternoon light. The peasants grow restless in the eastern provinces, tax collectors stoned, grain stores burned. He pushed the parchment aside. Discontentment spreads like plague, perhaps reducing the harvest tithe. "We will not show weakness." The Duke interrupted, "But we must show compassion." He spoke the word as though it tasted foreign. "The council and I have determined a more symbolic gesture is required." Edmund sensed the weight of duty descending upon him before his father spoke the words. "You will marry." The marriage contract lay between them, its wax seal unbroken. Edmund stared at it without reaching forward. "The oaken-veiled girl," his father continued. "Her father serves as village elder. The commoners respect him. You wish me to marry a peasant?" Edmund failed to mask his disbelief. "I am your heir, the future Duke of precisely why it must be you." The Duke stood, towering over the desk. "This union will demonstrate our benevolence while reminding the common folk of their proper place, grateful recipients of our generosity." Edmund swallowed his objections. Duty had been instilled in him since childhood. Duty to family, to nobility, to Westmere. His personal desires had never factored into such equations. "When shall I meet this bride?" The Duke's thin smile didn't reach his eyes. "Tomorrow. A contingent will bring her to the castle. You'll be wed within the month." The following afternoon, Edmund awaited his betrothed in the castle's receiving hall. Court nobles lingered nearby, curiosity barely concealed behind practiced smiles. "Presenting Miss Lena of Oakenvale," the steward announced. The young woman who entered wore a simple blue dress, unadorned save for delicate embroidery at the collar. Her movements were measured, her eyes downcast in practiced deference. A modest veil obscured her features. "My lord," she curtsied with unexpected grace. Edmund nodded stiffly. "Miss Oakenvale." "Just Lena, if it pleases you, my lord." Edmund studied what little he could see of her. "Does this arrangement please you, Lena of Oakenvale?" She hesitated, choosing words carefully. "I serve where I am needed, my lord." A diplomatic answer. Perhaps the girl had some intelligence, though Edmund doubted she could read, much less understand courtly politics. "You understand your role," Edmund spoke softly, ensuring only she could hear. "To be seen, admired for my generosity, and to help quell the eastern unrest." The veiled face tilted slightly. For an instant, Edmund sensed something unexpected, defiance, perhaps. Before she lowered her gaze again, "I understand duty, my lord," she replied, "better than you might imagine." In the weeks that followed, Edmund maintained his distance, meeting his betrothed only during carefully orchestrated public appearances. Court tutors attempted to prepare her for noble life, though reports suggested she learned protocols with surprising ease. "She's educated beyond what one would expect," reported Lady Batrice. Edmund's aunt, during a private dinner, reads and writes in 3 languages, conducts herself with unusual refinement. Unusual indeed, Edmund swirled his wine. Perhaps she was trained in anticipation of an advantageous marriage. Perhaps, his aunt mused, though something about her seems familiar. Edmund dismissed the comment. The wedding preparations consumed the castle, a spectacle designed to demonstrate Westmere's prosperity and benevolence. Nobility from neighboring provinces received invitations, including representatives from Avalonia, their historic rival, whose royal family had been overthrown years ago. The night before his wedding, Edmund stood on the castle battlements, staring across the darkened valley. Having doubts, brother, his younger sister Marianne joined him, about marrying a commoner for political convenience. Edmund's voice carried no emotion. I've always known my marriage would serve Westmere, not my heart. You've barely spoken to her. What could we possibly have to discuss? Our vastly different upbringings, her rural observations on crop rotation. Marianne shook her head. Your arrogance blinds you. You've decided her worth based solely on her supposed station. Edmund frowned. My personal feelings are irrelevant. Tomorrow I perform my duty to our family and our people. Then perhaps, Marianne said, departing, you deserve exactly the bride you expect. Dawn broke on his wedding day, and with it came the culmination of weeks of preparation. Edmund stood before his mirror, attendants adjusting his ceremonial attire, the weight of family legacy embodied in the ancestral signet ring on his finger. Little did he know how dramatically his expectations would be shattered before sundown. The woman known to Lord Edmund as Lena of Oakenvale sat alone in her chambers, turning a small golden locket between her fingers. Opening it revealed 2 miniature portraits, a regal man with kind eyes and a woman whose amber gaze mirrored her own. Princess Elara of Avalonia traced their faces with a gentle fingertip. One more day, mother and father, she whispered. One more day until your daughter begins to reclaim what was stolen. 10 years earlier, on her 14th birthday, Princess Elara had awakened to screams echoing through the royal palace of Avalonia. Her lady-in-waiting had burst into her chambers, face ashen. Invaders in the palace. Lord Westmere's forces have breached the gates. Through secret passages known only to the royal family, Elara had fled with nothing but her nightclothes and the locket clutched in her palm. From the forest's edge, she had watched flames consume her childhood home while her parents' fate remained unknown. Take this and run north, her guard had instructed, pressing a dagger into her hand before returning to the battle. Seek the Oakenvale family. They remain loyal. For a decade, Elara had lived among common folk, first with the Oakenvales, then moving between loyal households as Duke Harrington's men hunted for any surviving royals. She had learned to speak, move, and work as a peasant girl, while secretly continuing her education through Avalonian loyalists. The true Lena Oakenvale had willingly exchanged places with her, traveling to distant relatives while Elara assumed her identity. The deception had been maintained for years, allowing Elara to gather information and build a network of supporters. When news came of Lord Edmund's search for a bride, Elara had recognized her opportunity. The elder Oakenvale had connections with the village leader, proposed for the arrangement. With careful manipulation and strategic bribes, Elara ensured she would be the bride presented to the Westmere heir. Now, on the eve of her wedding, she prepared for the culmination of her long-laid plans. A soft knock interrupted her contemplation. Elara quickly tucked the locket into a hidden pocket sewn into her gown. Enter, she called, adopting the meek demeanor she had perfected. Margot, her assigned lady's maid and secret Avalonian loyalist, entered carrying linens. All preparations are complete, Miss Margot announced loudly for any listening ears, then barely audibly. Our people are in position throughout the castle, 20 loyal guards disguised among the servants. Elara nodded, imperceptibly. Thank you, Margot. I believe I shall rest now, before tomorrow's celebrations. When they were alone, Margot spoke more freely. The veil arrived. It's perfect, thick enough to conceal your features until the proper moment. And after the revelation, The escape route is secure. The old tunnels beneath the North Tower remain unguarded. A horse will be waiting. Margot hesitated. Princess, there is still great risk. If Duke Harrington realizes your identity before the ceremony is complete, the ceremony must be completed. Elara insisted. Only as Edmund's lawful wife will I have standing to reclaim Avalonia's throne. Once our marriage is recognized by the clergy and witnessed by nobles from both kingdoms, not even Harrington can undo it without significant political damage. Margot bowed her head. And Lord Edmund, what of him when he discovers the truth? Elara's expression hardened. He is his father's son, raised on stories of Avalonian inferiority. His pride in making a charitable marriage to a commoner disgusts me. She touched her locket. Let him feel the shame of discovering he's wed the very bloodline his family sought to destroy. And if he retaliates, I've survived worse than a nobleman's wounded pride. Elara moved to the window, gazing toward distant mountains. For 10 years I've watched my people suffer under Westmere rule. Edmund's precious reputation relies on appearing benevolent. He won't risk being seen as a tyrant by harming me. Later, as night fell, Elara removed her simple dress and stood before a small mirror. The calluses on her hands told the story of years living as a commoner, farming, cooking, mending. Yet her posture remained regal, impossible to fully disguise. She practiced the expressions she would need for tomorrow, the shy bride, the grateful peasant, and finally, when the moment came to lift her veil, the triumphant princess reclaiming her rightful place. From beneath her mattress, Elara withdrew a small vial. Courage, her herbalist had called it, a tonic to steady nerves and sharpen senses. To Avalonia, she whispered, drinking the bitter liquid. To justice. Elara slept with the royal locket clutched in her hand, dreaming of crowns and retribution, unaware that fate had more complex plans than either she or Edmund had prepared for. Gasps rippled through the cathedral like wind through summer wheat. The Bishop of Westmere, his ceremonial staff, clutched tightly, faltered mid-blessing. By the saints, he whispered, loud enough for those nearest to hear. Princess Elara of Avalonia stands before us. The cathedral erupted into chaos. Nobles rose from their seats, straining for a better view. Guards reached for swords. Edmund remained frozen, his shocked gaze locked with Elara's defiant one. Impossible, Duke Harrington boomed, striding forward. The Avalonian royal line perished in the uprising. This is deception, but Lord Garrett of the northern provinces stepped forward, his aged voice cutting through the tumult. I knew King Alaric for 30 years. Those are his daughter's eyes. There is no mistaking the royal bloodline. The bishop raised his ornate staff, its crystal headpiece catching the colored light streaming through stained glass. This ceremony cannot proceed under false. It will proceed, Duke Harrington interrupted, his voice dangerous. My son has given his word before God and country. Edmund finally found his voice. Father, you cannot expect silence. The Duke's command echoed against stone walls. He turned to the assembled nobles, his diplomatic mask firmly in place. A joyous surprise, the lost princess of Avalonia miraculously survived and returned on this blessed day. What greater symbol of unity between our peoples could there be? Murmurs spread through the cathedral as the political implications dawned. Avalonian representatives huddled together, their expressions shifting from shock to calculation. Edmund grabbed Elara's arm, pulling her aside while the congregation buzzed. You deceived Eve, he hissed through clenched teeth. As your family deceived the world, she replied evenly. Claiming Avalonia's royal family died when you knew full well a child escaped that night. I knew nothing of. The ceremony continues, Duke Harrington announced. Bishop, proceed with God's work. The bishop hesitated, his gaze moving between the angry duke and the unexpected princess. He clutched his staff like a shield, the symbol of his spiritual authority, suddenly fragile against political forces. Your Grace, he began cautiously. "Perhaps we should verify." The Duke stepped close, speaking softly. "Remember who funded the cathedral's new East Wing bishop. Remember who can just as easily withdraw support from the church's charitable works." The bishop's shoulders sagged. He nodded once, then raised his staff. "Let us continue this blessed union." As the ceremony resumed, Edmund moved mechanically, his mind reeling. He stole glances at the woman beside him, not the humble peasant he'd prepared himself to wed, but the heir to the kingdom his family had conquered through bloodshed. "If you expect me to play the loving husband after this deception," Edmund whispered, as they knelt for blessing, "you are sorely mistaken." Ilara's smile remained serene for the onlookers. "I expect nothing from you, Lord Westmere, except the legal protection this marriage provides. Whether you play loving husband matters not at all to me." The bishop's staff hovered above their heads as he pronounced final blessings. The ornate gold and crystal piece, passed down through generations of Westmere's spiritual leaders, now consecrated a union built entirely on lies. From the front row, Lady Marianne watched her brother's face with concern. Nearby, Edmund's closest friend, Sir Roland, subtly positioned himself between several Avalonian nobles, hand resting on his sword hilt. "With the power vested in me," the bishop proclaimed, visibly eager to conclude the ceremony, "I pronounce you husband and wife." No joyous applause followed, only tense, scattered clapping and the immediate buzz of political speculation. As Edmund and Ilara processed down the aisle, forced smiles plastered on both their faces. A messenger slipped in through the side entrance. He whispered urgently to Duke Harrington, whose expression darkened further. "Avalonian banners have been raised in 3 eastern villages," the Duke muttered to his captain of guards. "News of the princess travels faster than we anticipated." Outside the cathedral, the common folk who had gathered to witness the charitable union of noble and peasant now pressed forward, confusion evident as rumors spread about the bride's true identity. "Is it true?" one woman called out. "Has our princess returned?" Guards formed a protective barrier around the newlywed couple as they entered the waiting carriage. Inside, Edmund and Ilara sat rigidly apart, the small space thick with tension. "This marriage changes nothing," Edmund said coldly as the carriage lurched forward. "Avalonia remains under Westmere rule." Ilara turned to him, her regal bearing now fully evident. "This marriage changes everything, my lord. The game has only just begun." As they returned to Westmere Castle, ravens flew in all directions, carrying news that would shake the foundations of 2 kingdoms. Westmere Castle's east wing had been hastily prepared for the new couple. 2 adjacent chambers connected by a shared sitting room, a compromise between marital proximity and the obvious tension between bride and groom. Edmund stood in his chamber, servants removing his ceremonial attire in silence. Through the open doorway, he glimpsed Ilara's handmaids helping her out of her wedding gown. He turned away sharply. "Leave us," he ordered the servants. "All of you." The attendants exchanged nervous glances before bowing and withdrawing. Edmund waited until the last door closed before crossing into the sitting room. He poured himself a generous cup of wine. "Was any of it real?" he asked, without turning, as he sensed Ilara enter behind him. "Or was every moment calculated deception?" Ilara stood in the doorway of her chamber, now dressed in a simple blue robe. "Would you have spoken more than 10 sentences to me had you known my true identity? We'll never know, will we?" Edmund drank deeply. "Though I suspect you calculated that as well. I did what was necessary for my survival and the future of my people." She moved further into the room, maintaining careful distance. "Just as you did your duty to yours by agreeing to marry a supposed peasant." Edmund laughed bitterly. "How convenient that our respective duties have landed us in this farce of a marriage." "A farce with very real consequences," Ilara reminded him. "By sunrise, every noble house will be positioning themselves in response to this development." Outside the window, torches moved through the courtyard as guards doubled their patrols. From the town below, distant shouting could be heard, the news spreading among common folk. My father wishes to meet with us at dawn, Edmund said, refilling his cup. No doubt to construct whatever narrative best serves Westmere. And you? Alara asked. What do you wish, Lord Edmund? He studied her properly for the first time, the proud posture she no longer concealed, the intelligent eyes that had always seemed too perceptive for a simple peasant girl. I wish to understand what game is being played, and my role in it. He gestured to their separate chambers. Rest assured, Princess, I have no intention of claiming marital rights. How noble of you, she replied dryly. A heavy knock interrupted them. Edmund opened the door to find Sir Roland, his expression grave. My lord, there's unrest in the lower town. People gathering, demanding to see the princess. Edmund glanced back at Alara. It seems your subjects call for you already. They were always my subjects, she replied. Even when forced to bend knee to Westmere, Roland cleared his throat uncomfortably. There's more. Duke Harrington has dispatched riders to the eastern garrisons. The troops are being mobilized. Edmund's jaw tightened. Leave us, Roland, after his friend departed. Edmund turned back to Alara. My father prepares for war while we exchange barbs. Perhaps we should establish some terms for this arrangement, however unwanted it may be. Very well. Alara sat in one of the chairs, her posture impeccable. I propose a truce between us, regardless of the politics beyond these walls. A truce? Edmund raised an eyebrow. Defined how? We present a united front in public. Neither undermines the other. We exchange information freely about threats to either of us. Edmund considered this, and in private. In private we need not pretend affection, but basic courtesy would make this situation more bearable. Outside the castle, the distant sounds of the crowd grew louder. Edmund moved to the window, watching the torches multiply in the town below. It seems I've married the spark that may ignite a revolution, he observed, or a chance for peace, if we're wise enough to seize it. Alara joined him at the window, careful to maintain distance. Your father conquered through bloodshed. We have an opportunity to unite through marriage instead. Edmund turned to her, searching her face for deception. Is that truly what you want? Peace, not retribution. What I want, Alara said softly, is justice for my family and freedom for my people. How we achieve that depends largely on you, Lord Edmund. The tension between them was interrupted by another knock. This time a servant entered with a tray of food and wine. His Grace the Duke requested refreshments for your wedding night, the man said, eyes carefully averted from both of them. Once alone again, Edmund and Alara regarded the marriage feast laid before them, neither moving to partake. To our uneasy truce, Edmund finally said, raising his cup. Alara nodded, lifting her own. To unexpected beginnings. They drank in silence as the castle settled into night, two people bound by duty and deception, each retreating to their separate chambers, as the first day of their marriage came to an uncertain close. The great hall buzzed with barely contained excitement as nobles jockeyed for position near the high table. 1 week had passed since the revelation at the cathedral, and this was Alara's first formal appearance as both Princess of Avalonia and Lady of Westmere. Circling vultures, Edmund murmured as he escorted her through the crowd, each hoping to benefit from this unexpected turn of events. I recognize the type well enough, Alara replied, though the faces have changed. Duke Harrington presided at the center of the high table, his smile fixed and cold. To his right sat Lady Beatrice, Edmund's widowed aunt, her shrewd eyes missing nothing. On his left, Lord Chancellor Godwin, whose family had administered Westmere's laws for 3 generations. My son and his bride, the Duke announced, as they approached. His emphasis on the word bride carried subtle mockery. Edmund and Alara took their assigned seats with practiced dignity. A servant appeared with wine, pouring carefully into silver goblets before each noble. As he reached Alara, she noticed a subtle movement, his sleeve brushing against her cup. Without hesitation, she reached for Edmund's goblet instead of her own. A toast to my husband, she announced, taking a deliberate sip from his cup before passing it back. Edmund's eyes widened momentarily before understanding dawned. He accepted his cup, watching as the servant grew pale.
"You seem unwell," Edmund addressed the man quietly. "Perhaps you should rest."
The servant backed away, bumping into Lord Chancellor Godwin, who frowned at the interruption. "Your bride has unusual manners," Lady Beatrice observed to Edmund. "Sharing cups is hardly proper protocol. Many customs differ between our kingdoms." Elara replied smoothly. "In Avalonia, a wife honoring her husband by drinking first is considered good fortune." Edmund's lips twitched with something almost like amusement. A charming tradition. From his position, Duke Harrington studied the exchange with narrowed eyes. He beckoned a guard closer, whispering instructions as the feast proceeded. The first course arrived, pheasant stuffed with herbs and winter berries. Elara discreetly placed a silver spoon beside each dish, presented to her. The small utensil, a gift from Margul that morning, was crafted with a special alloy that darkened in the presence of certain poisons. "A useful trinket," Edmund commented under his breath, noticing the spoon. "A necessary one," she replied. Throughout the meal, nobles approached the high table to pay respects, some genuinely curious, others barely concealing their hostility. "Such an honor to meet Avalonia's lost princess," cooed Lady Millicent, wife of the kingdom's treasurer. "Your rural upbringing must make court life quite overwhelming." "On the contrary," Elara smiled. "Living among the people gives one insights that castle walls often obscure." "Indeed," added Lord Percival, an elderly advisor who had served 3 generations of Westmere rulers. "Perhaps that explains the unrest in the eastern provinces. They sense their princess has returned." The Duke cleared his throat loudly. "Enough talk of provincial matters. Tonight we celebrate the union of our houses." Later, as musicians played and couples began to dance, Edmund leaned closer to Elara. "My father has been in private council with the border commanders all week. 12 regiments have been dispatched eastward." Elara's expression remained pleasant despite the news. "Preparing for war while hosting feasts, efficient, if not subtle." "He fears your supporters will rally," Edmund continued. "There are reports of Avalonian banners appearing in villages overnight. I've been confined to the castle since our wedding. How could I possibly coordinate such activities?" Her voice carried innocent surprise, though her eyes held a different message. Edmund studied her. "Someone certainly coordinates them." Sir Roland approached, bowing formally. "My lord, my lady." "The Duke requests Lord Edmund's presence in his study." "Now?" Edmund frowned. "Most urgently, my lord." Edmund turned to Elara. "Will you excuse me? Roland will remain at your side." When Edmund had gone, Sir Roland maintained a respectful distance while keeping Elara within sight. "The east wing has been secured as you requested, my lord," he said quietly. "No servants enter without direct approval." "Thank you, Sir Roland." Elara observed the gathering nobles. "You've served the Westmere family long." "Since boyhood, my lady. Lord Edmund and I trained together." "And your loyalty is to him specifically, or to Duke Harrington?" Roland hesitated before answering. "My loyalty is to Westmere." A diplomatic answer. Elara smiled, though perhaps not a complete one. Across the hall, Lady Marianne approached. "Princess Elara, might we speak privately?" Roland tensed, but Elara nodded graciously. "Of course, Lady Marianne." Once seated in a quiet alcove, Edmund's sister leaned forward. "I should warn you, the servant who attempted to poison your wine has been found dead. The official report will claim suicide." Elara's composure didn't falter. "How convenient. My father eliminates loose ends efficiently." Marianne glanced around before continuing. "My brother may present a cold exterior, but he values justice over blind loyalty. Remember that in the days ahead." Before Elara could respond, a commotion at the main entrance drew all eyes. Edmund had returned, his expression thunderous as he strode directly toward Elara. "Come," he said tersely, offering his arm. "We're leaving. Now." Edmund pulled Elara through the dimly lit corridor, his grip firm but not painful. Guards, posted at intervals, watched their hasty retreat from the feast, with carefully neutral expressions. "What has happened?" Elara demanded, matching his stride despite her formal gown. "Not here," Edmund replied tersely. They reached their chambers, and Edmund dismissed the stationed guards with a sharp gesture. Once inside, he locked the door and checked each room before speaking. "My father received word of Avalonian loyalists gathering near the northern border," he finally explained. "He believes you've been communicating with them." Elara's expression remained carefully composed. "And have I been tried and convicted of this crime already?" "He doesn't need proof." Edmund ran a hand through his hair. "He's authorized Lord Godwin to question you, using whatever means necessary." The implication hung heavy between them. Elara paled slightly but lifted her chin. "I see. You don't," Edmund insisted. "Godwin's interrogation methods are infamous. Men twice your size have broken within hours. And you've brought me here to what? Hide me?" Disbelief colored her voice. "Why would you protect me from your father's orders?" Edmund moved to the window, checking the courtyard below. "The marriage contract signed before witnesses from both kingdoms guarantees your safety and dignity as my wife. My father cannot undermine that without breaking faith with every noble house that witnessed our union. So you protect me to protect the sanctity of contracts." Elara studied him. "How noble." Edmund turned sharply. "I protect you because torture is beneath us. Because whatever game my father plays, I will not be party to brutality against a woman, even one who deceived me." A soft knock interrupted them. Edmund's hand moved instinctively to the ornate sword mounted above the fireplace, a family heirloom generations old, its hilt inlaid with the Westmere crest. "My lord," Sir Roland's voice came through the door. Edmund took down the sword before answering. The weapon gleamed in the firelight, well-maintained and battle-ready despite its ceremonial appearance. "Enter," Edmund called, keeping the sword in hand. Roland slipped inside, securing the door behind him. 6 of the Duke's personal guards are searching the east wing. Lord Godwin accompanies them. "How long?" "Minutes at most." Roland glanced at the sword in Edmund's hand. "My lord, if you oppose your father in this..." Edmund tested the sword's weight with practiced ease. "If I do nothing, I am complicit. You know what Godwin will do to her." 15 years earlier, a young Edmund had stood in the training yard, wooden practice sword in hand. His instructor, a grizzled knight named Sir Talmage, had drilled into him the principles of Westmere nobility. "A sword is not merely a weapon, boy," Talmage had growled. "It is an extension of your honor. Draw it only when prepared to defend something worthy your kingdom, your family, your principles." The memory flashed through Edmund's mind as he now stood with the very real family sword in hand. His father had presented it on his 18th birthday, a symbol of his place in the Westmere lineage. "There's a passage behind the tapestry in my chamber," Edmund decided. "It leads to the old armory. Roland, escort the princess there and remain hidden until I send word." "And you," Elara asked. "I will deal with my father's men." Edmund's grip tightened on the sword. "They cannot question what they cannot find." Roland moved toward the tapestry, but Elara hesitated. "Why risk your father's wrath for me? We've established no love between us." Edmund's expression hardened. "This isn't about you. It's about what kind of ruler I intend to be when my time comes. Not one who permits torture in these halls." Heavy footsteps echoed in the corridor outside. Edmund nodded to Roland, who pulled aside the tapestry, revealing a narrow stone passage. "Go," Edmund commanded. As Elara moved toward the hidden door, she paused beside him. "Your instructor taught you well, Lord Edmund." His surprise must have shown on his face, for she added, "Your stance. You were trained by someone from the northern provinces. The way you balance the sword is distinctive." Before Edmund could respond, a pounding at the chamber door demanded attention. "Lord Edmund, by order of Duke Harrington, open this door." Roland and Elara slipped into the passage as Edmund composed himself, lowering but not sheathing the sword. He opened the door to find Lord Godwin flanked by guards. "Lord Chancellor," Edmund greeted coldly, "to what do I owe this disruption?" Godwin's thin lips pressed together. "We have orders to escort your wife to the Duke's study for questioning. My wife is indisposed." Edmund blocked the doorway. "Whatever questions you have can wait until morning. These orders come directly from your father, and I answer directly that you will not disturb the princess tonight." Edmund allowed the sword in his hand to catch the light. "Unless you wish to explain to my father why you've drawn blood in his heir's chambers." The standoff stretched for several heartbeats before Godwin stepped back. "The Duke will hear of this defiance. I expect nothing less." Edmund watched them retreat before closing and bolting the door. Alone he stared at the family sword in his hand, the weight of his choice settling upon his shoulders. Dawn broke over Westmere Castle as Edmund paced the hidden armory. The confrontation with his father had been predictably explosive. Accusations of undermining family authority, warnings about Elara's influence, threats of consequences. Through it all, Edmund had maintained one position: his wife would not be subjected to Godwin's questioning methods. "The princess remains safely hidden?" Duke Harrington had finally asked, voice dangerously quiet. "My wife remains under my protection," Edmund had answered, emphasizing the legal bond between them. Now, hours later, Edmund nursed a throbbing pain where his father's signet ring had connected with his temple during their heated exchange. Blood had dried along his hairline, and his vision occasionally blurred. The hidden door creaked open. Edmund drew his dagger, relaxing only when Roland's familiar figure appeared. "The guards have been reassigned to the outer walls," his friend reported. "It seems your father has changed tactics rather than force a direct confrontation with you." Behind Roland came Elara, her formal gown exchanged for a simple dress borrowed from a maid. She gasped softly at the sight of Edmund's injury. "You're wounded," she said, moving toward him with unexpected concern. Edmund waved her away. "It's nothing. It's not nothing. You have a concussion." She turned to Roland. "Fetch my handmaid, Margot. Tell her to bring my wooden box from beneath the bed." Roland glanced at Edmund, who nodded reluctantly. When they were alone, Elara tore a strip from her petticoat and approached Edmund again. "Sit," she commanded, her tone leaving no room for argument. Surprisingly, Edmund complied, watching as she dipped the cloth in water from a nearby pitcher and began cleaning his wound. Her touch was gentle but confident. "You've done this before," he observed. "Many times." Her focus remained on his injury. "Living among villagers, one learns practical skills. The local healer took me as an apprentice for several years." A princess apprenticed to a village healer. Edmund winced as she pressed on a particularly tender spot. "Somehow I doubt that was part of your royal education." A small smile touched her lips. "My royal education taught me that true leaders understand the lives of all their people, not just those in castles." Margot arrived with a worn wooden box, its surface carved with intricate botanical designs. Elara opened it to reveal dozens of small compartments containing herbs, powders, and tinctures. A comprehensive medicine kit no noble lady would typically possess. "Yarrow for the bleeding," she murmured, selecting dried leaves from one compartment. "Willow bark for pain." She worked methodically, grinding herbs with a small mortar and pestle, mixing them with oils and honey. The resulting paste she applied to Edmund's wound before binding it with a clean bandage. "The dizziness should subside by evening," she told him. "Though you should avoid wine for several days." Edmund touched the bandage gingerly. "Where did you learn medicine this sophisticated? This isn't simple village herbcraft." Elara's hands stilled over her box. "My mother was known for her healing skills. When I escaped the night of the coup, I had nothing of hers except memories of the remedies she taught me. Learning from village healers was my way of maintaining that connection." The vulnerability in her voice caught Edmund off guard. For a moment she wasn't the deceiving princess or political opponent, but simply a woman who had lost her family. "Your mother would be proud of your skill," he said quietly. Surprise flickered across Ilara's face before she composed herself. "Thank you." Roland returned with news that the Duke had called an emergency council meeting. "They're discussing increased reports of Avalonian activity in the border towns," he reported. "3 villages have openly declared allegiance to the returned princess." "My father believes you orchestrated this from within our walls," Edmund said to Ilara. She closed her medicine box carefully. "The people of Avalonia have waited 10 years for any sign of their royal family. News of my survival would spread rapidly without any coordination from me." "Yet you don't seem surprised by their loyalty," Edmund observed. "Should I be? Would Westmere peasants not celebrate if their rightful ruler returned after years of occupation?" She met his gaze steadily. "The common folk have longer memories than nobles often credit them with." Edmund considered her words. "If not you, then who coordinates these demonstrations of loyalty?" "Perhaps no one. Perhaps everyone." Ilara's expression softened slightly. "You were raised to believe leadership flows from nobility to commoners. In Avalonia we understand it flows both ways." The insight struck Edmund more profoundly than he expected. His years of military training had emphasized command and authority, never the wisdom that might rise from those beneath his station. "Your head will pain you less if you rest," Ilara said, breaking the thoughtful silence. "I can prepare a sleeping draught and leave myself vulnerable to whatever schemes you might be planning," Edmund replied, though without real suspicion. Ilara's smile held unexpected warmth. "If I wished you harm, my lord, I would hardly have spent my best yarrow poultice on your wound." Despite himself, Edmund found an answering smile forming on his lips. Perhaps not. For the first time since their wedding, the silence between them held something other than hostility. 3 days passed, with an uneasy truce between Edmund and Ilara. The Duke, seemingly placated by increased border patrols, had not renewed his demands for Ilara's interrogation. Instead, she found herself under constant but distant observation guards, rehearsed at respectful distances, servants reporting her movement. Tending the small herb garden she'd been permitted in the castle's inner courtyard, Ilara carefully arranged freshly cut flowers in a shallow basket. To casual observers, she was merely a noble lady engaging in a refined pastime. None would notice the specific positioning of each blossom: purple irises pointing north, white daisies grouped in clusters of 3, red roses crossed with sprigs of lavender. "Beautiful arrangement, my lady." Ilara glanced up to find Lady Beatrice observing her work. The older woman's shrewd eyes missed nothing. "Thank you. Flowers were a luxury rarely afforded during my years in hiding," Ilara replied, her hands continuing their precise movements. "I find comfort in them now." "Indeed." Lady Beatrice seated herself on a nearby stone bench. "Though I find it curious you favor the Avalonian style of arrangement, meaning through positioning rather than mere aesthetic appeal." Ilara's hands stilled momentarily before resuming their work. "Old habits from childhood lessons." "Quite." The older woman's smile didn't reach her eyes. "I spent several years at the Avalonian court in my youth. Your mother was particularly skilled in the language of flowers, a message system as effective as any coded letter for those who understand it." Before Ilara could respond, a young kitchen maid approached with fresh water for the flowers. The girl, Lissa, had arrived at the castle shortly after the wedding, her red-gold hair marking her Avalonian heritage. "Your water, my lady," Lissa said with a perfect curtsy, her eyes downcast. "Thank you, Lissa." Ilara took the pitcher, their fingers brushing briefly, long enough for a small folded paper to pass between them. Lady Beatrice rose gracefully. "I shall leave you to your gardening, princess. Though I recommend caution, some blooms appear vibrant but carry thorns." When the older woman had departed, Ilara exhaled slowly. The warning was clear. Her flower messages had been noticed, if not yet decoded. She would need to be more careful. Later that evening, alone in her chamber, Ilara carefully unfolded the note Lissa had passed her. "Northern villages secure. Eastern garrison divided in loyalties. Baron Thornfield pledges support. Await your signal. Keller, her childhood friend and captain of the former Royal Guard, had survived the coup and spent years building a network of loyalists. His messages, smuggled through a rotating staff of servants with Avalonian heritage, were her only reliable connection to the resistance movement. Alara burned the note and scattered the ashes in the fireplace. As she turned from the hearth, the door opened without warning. Edmund entered, appearing troubled. "You might consider knocking," Alara remarked, heart racing as she wondered if he'd seen her dispose of the message. "My apologies." Edmund seemed distracted. "Have you spoken with Lady Beatrice today?" Alara's guard instantly rose. "Briefly in the guard." "Why?" "She spoke with my father at length this afternoon." Edmund closed the door. "She mentioned your flowers." Silence fell between them. Alara maintained a neutral expression, though her mind raced through possible explanations. "Interesting that you arranged them in the old Royal Avalonian style," Edmund continued, studying her reaction. "My aunt recognized the pattern from her time at your father's court. I was unaware flower arranging was considered suspicious activity," Alara replied evenly. "It is, unless the arrangements convey messages to those who understand the code." Alara met his gaze directly. "And do you understand the code, Lord Edmund?" "No." He moved to the window, looking out over the darkened courtyard. "But others might. The kitchen girl, Lissa, she's Avalonian, isn't she?" "Many servants are. Westmere conquered Avalonia, but your father wisely employed its people rather than slaughtering them all." Edmund turned back to her. "She brings you more than water for your flowers." It wasn't a question. Alara considered her options carefully. Denial would only confirm his suspicions. Admission could be dangerous. "Would you expect me to abandon my people entirely?" she finally asked. "To forget those who remained loyal through years of occupation?" "I expect you to remember that whatever game you play endangers not only yourself, but potentially hundreds of lives." Edmund's voice remained calm, despite the gravity of his words. "If my father discovers organized communication with Avalonian loyalists, he will respond with force. I communicate with my people because they deserve to know their princess lives," Alara said. Nothing more. Edmund studied her, clearly weighing the truth of her words. The East Garrison reports increased movement near the old border. Farmers with pitchforks have become soldiers with swords. Farmers defending their homes, perhaps. Armed and organized farmers. Edmund stepped closer. "Someone coordinates them, provides weapons, information about guard rotations, someone with knowledge of military strategy." Alara maintained her composure. "And you believe that someone is me, a princess who spent a decade hiding as a peasant. I believe you have allies more dangerous than flower-carrying servants." Edmund's tone softened unexpectedly. "Allies who may act without considering your safety behind these walls." The genuine concern in his voice caught Alara off guard. "You worry for my safety. I worry for everyone caught in brewing conflict." He hesitated. "Including you." Their eyes met, and for a brief moment understanding passed between them. Two people caught in forces larger than their personal grievances. "Your garden visits will continue undisturbed," Edmund said finally. "But whatever messages you send, consider their consequences carefully." As he turned to leave, Alara called after him. "Edmund." He paused at the door. "Thank you," she said simply. He nodded once and departed, leaving Alara to wonder if she'd found an unexpected ally in her husband, or merely a more complex adversary. Morning mist clung to the ancient oaks of Westmere Forest as the hunting party assembled in the castle courtyard. Edmund adjusted his riding gloves, watching as Alara was helped onto a chestnut mare. Her riding habit, hastily modified from one of Marianne's, was deep green, the color traditionally worn by Avalonian royalty during hunts. "A fine day for sport," the Duke announced, mounting his imposing black stallion. "The autumn stag will test our skills." The invitation, or rather command, for Alara to join the royal hunt had come unexpectedly. Edmund suspected his father's motives had little to do with tradition. and more with observing Elara outside the castle walls. "My lady wife is an accomplished rider," Edmund commented as they set out, a strategic compliment meant to establish her legitimate place among them. "Indeed?" The Duke raised an eyebrow. "Unusual skills for a girl raised in hiding." "The farmer who sheltered me kept horses," Elara replied smoothly. A noble hobby was reframed as practical skill, learning to plough fields and deliver medicines to outlying cottages. Sir Roland rode alongside Edmund, occasionally glancing back at the dozen armed guards who accompanied them, far more than customary for a simple hunt. "Your father seems determined to make a statement with this expedition," he murmured. Edmund nodded slightly. "He parades his captive princess before arriving dignitaries, proving his control while demonstrating family unity." 2 hours into the forest, they reached a clearing where servants had prepared a mid-hunt repast. As they dismounted, Edmund noticed Elara scanning the tree line with unusual intensity. "Admiring the forest, princess?" Lord Godwin asked, his tone insinuating. "Merely appreciating its vastness," she replied. "We had nothing comparable near our village. The western section extends nearly to the old Avalonian border," the Duke commented casually. "Though our patrols ensure no unauthorized crossings." The implication hung in the air as servants poured wine and distributed bread and cured meat. Edmund positioned himself beside Elara, maintaining the image of attentive husband, while providing buffer from his father's veiled interrogation. As they prepared to resume the hunt, distant horns sounded, 3 short blasts, followed by a long call. "That's not our hunting party," Sir Roland frowned, hand moving to his sword. The Duke's expression darkened. "Bandits have grown bold recently. Guards, form up." Before anyone could react further, arrows whistled through the clearing. One thudded into a tree trunk, inches from Edmund's head. "Take cover," he shouted, pulling Elara behind a massive oak. Chaos erupted as more arrows followed. Guards returned fire blindly into the forest, while the noble party scrambled for protection. "We're surrounded," Sir Roland reported, crouching beside Edmund and Elara. "At least a dozen attackers, possibly more." Edmund assessed their position grimly. The Duke and Lord Godwin had taken shelter behind an overturned cart with 4 guards. The remaining guards formed a defensive perimeter, but they were clearly outnumbered. "We need to reach the horses," Edmund decided. "Roland, can you—" A cry of pain interrupted as one of the guards fell, an arrow protruding from his shoulder. More attackers emerged from the trees, no longer relying on ranged weapons, but charging with swords drawn. "These are no common bandits," Roland muttered. "Their formation is too disciplined." Edmund drew his sword. "Stay here," he ordered Elara. To his surprise, she clutched his arm. "No, there's another way." Her voice dropped to an urgent whisper. Behind the lightning-struck oak, 50 paces north, a hollow tree trunk conceals an entrance. Entrance to what? Ancient tunnels. They run beneath the entire forest, smugglers' routes from the last border war. Edmund stared at her. "How could you possibly know? There's no time." She pointed to where his father's position was being overrun. "Trust me, or watch your father die." The sincerity in her eyes decided him. "Roland." "To me," Edmund called. Then to his father, "Fall back to the North Oak. We have an escape route." The Duke's face registered surprise, then grudging acceptance as his guards helped him retreat toward Edmund's position. Lord Godwin followed, blood streaming from a cut on his forehead. "This way." Elara led them to a massive oak split by lightning years ago. She pressed against a section of bark that looked no different from the rest, revealing a narrow opening within the hollow trunk. "Impossible," Lord Godwin breathed. Questions later, Edmund pushed him forward. "Enter now." One by one they descended through the opening, finding rough-hewn stone steps leading into darkness. Roland produced a small torch from his hunting kit, illuminating a low tunnel stretching into blackness. How far do these extend? The Duke demanded once they were all safely inside and the entrance concealed again. Miles. Ilara replied, this section runs beneath the entire royal forest. Originally constructed during the reign of King Alaric I. My ancestor 5 centuries ago. Edmund studied the tunnel with newfound respect, and maintained since, judging by the lack of decay, these tunnels connect to the old castle catacombs, Ilara continued, leading them forward. We can emerge within Westmere's walls, undetected. The Duke's shrewd gaze fixed on her. How convenient that you possess such intimate knowledge of secret passages beneath my lands, Princess. Knowledge preserved by those loyal to Avalonia's history, she replied evenly. Knowledge that just saved your life, your grace. They walked in tense silence, the passage occasionally branching into multiple routes. Ilara navigated without hesitation, her confidence in this subterranean maze remarkable. Who were those attackers? Roland finally asked the question weighing on everyone's mind. Not Avalonian loyalists. Ilara stated firmly, meeting the Duke's suspicious glare. My people would not risk my safety with such an attack. Then who? Edmund pressed. Someone who benefits from escalating tensions between our kingdoms, she suggested. Someone who knows these tunnels exist. The implication settled uncomfortably as they continued their journey through the ancient passage, allies of necessity in the darkness beneath the forest. The castle had finally settled into uneasy silence hours after their return through the secret tunnels. Guards doubled at every entrance, servants questioned, scouts dispatched to identify the mysterious attackers, all while rumors spread through the keep like wildfire. Edmund stood at the window of their shared sitting room, watching torchlight flicker along the outer walls. The attack had shaken him more than he cared to admit. Not for his own safety, but for how easily they might have all perished, despite their armed escort. A soft knock preceded Ilara's entrance. She had changed from her mud-stained riding habit into a simple blue nightgown and robe, her hair loose around her shoulders, rather than in its usual formal arrangement. I thought you might still be awake, she said, carrying a silver tray with a carafe and 2 goblets. Wine helps settle nerves after battle. Or so my father always claimed. Edmund turned from the window. Your father was wise in many things, it seems. She placed the tray on a small table between 2 chairs near the hearth. You needn't worry about poison. I'll pour from the same carafe and drink first. A ghost of a smile crossed Edmund's face. I'm beginning to believe if you wanted me dead, you'd have left me in the forest today. A valid assumption. She poured rich red wine into both goblets, taking a deliberate sip from one before offering it to him. To survival, Edmund accepted the goblet. To unexpected allies, they drank in silence, the crackling fire the only sound between them. Finally, Edmund spoke. Those tunnels, they're how your loyalists have moved undetected across our borders. It wasn't a question, but Ilara nodded anyway. Among other purposes, they've preserved Avalonian culture, smuggled books and artifacts that your father's men would have destroyed, helped families separated by the conflict reunite briefly. And you've known about them since your return. I've known about them since childhood. Ilara swirled the wine in her cup. My father showed me the castle entrance on my 10th birthday, a royal secret passed through generations. I never imagined they would save the life of Westmere's Duke. Edmund studied her across the rim of his goblet. You could have escaped through them at any time, yet you've remained. My goal was never escape. Her eyes met his, unexpectedly candid. A princess who flees accomplishes nothing. I returned to reclaim my birthright, not to run from it again. The honesty of her answer struck Edmund. For weeks they'd circled each other with half-truths and political maneuvering. This unguarded moment felt almost intrusive in its sincerity. When I was told I would marry a peasant girl, Edmund found himself saying, I resented the arrangement deeply. Not because of her supposed station, but because once again my life was being dictated by political necessity. Ilara listened quietly, allowing him to continue. I had a duty to Westmere, to my family legacy. Personal desires never factored into such decisions. Edmund stared into the depths of his wine. I've spent my entire life preparing to be the ruler my father expects, unwavering, strategic, putting kingdom before all else. Even happiness. Elara asked softly. Happiness is a luxury for those without responsibility. The words came automatically, rehearsed through years of self-discipline. Elara's laugh surprised him, not mocking but genuine. My father said something similar when I complained about diplomatic protocol lessons as a child. Yet he was the happiest man I knew despite ruling a kingdom. How did he manage that contradiction? He didn't see it as one. Elara's expression softened with memory. He believed that duty fulfilled with joy rather than resentment made one a better ruler. That people follow strength, yes, but they love compassion. Edmund considered this. Your father's philosophies didn't prevent his overthrow. Pain flashed across Elara's face. No, but they ensured that 10 years later, his people still fight for his daughter's return. Can your father claim such loyalty? The question hung between them, uncomfortable yet compelling. Edmund refilled their goblets. The shared bottle symbolizing a tentative trust neither had anticipated. The night of the coup, Elara said after a long silence, I watched our castle burn from the forest's edge. I was 14, terrified, certain I would die before morning. Her voice remained steady despite the weight of her words. A royal guard found me, disguised me in a peasant boy's clothes, and we traveled for weeks to reach the Oakenvale farm. I cried every night for my parents, for my home. Did you ever learn their fate? Edmund asked gently. She shook her head. Official records claim they died in the fire. My heart tells me otherwise, though hope fades with each passing year. The vulnerability of her confession moved Edmund unexpectedly. I lost my mother when I was 12. Fever took her in 3 days despite the court physician's efforts. I remember. Elara's soft response surprised him. My father ordered a week of mourning in Avalonia out of respect. I couldn't understand why we honored the death of our enemy's wife. She wasn't always an enemy, Edmund said quietly. Before the conflicts, our kingdoms were allies. My mother and your father were childhood friends. Elara's eyes widened slightly. I never knew that. History is conveniently rewritten by those in power. Edmund's gaze drifted to the fire. Perhaps there's more connecting our kingdoms than dividing them, if one looks back far enough. A knock at the door interrupted their unexpected moment of connection. Roland entered, his expression grave. My lord, my lady, riders have arrived with news. Avalonian forces have mobilized along the eastern border. Their banner, he hesitated, glancing at Elara, bears the royal crest and the words for the returned princess. The fragile warmth between them cooled instantly as political reality intruded once more. Edmund set down his wine, the brief respite of honesty, giving way to the responsibilities that defined them both. Summon the council, he ordered. We meet at dawn. Westmere's grand hall blazed with 1,000 candles, their light reflecting off gilded mirrors and crystal chandeliers. Musicians played from the balcony as nobles from across the kingdom and neighboring provinces filled the vast space, their finery a kaleidoscope of wealth and state. The Duke had declared the autumn ball would proceed despite border tensions, a show of strength and normalcy, while diplomats worked to diffuse the brewing conflict. Elara stood at Edmund's side, greeting guests as they arrived. Her gown of silver and deep blue, Avalonia's royal colors, made a statement that hadn't escaped notice. The Duke had frowned, but said nothing, understanding the political theater at play. Tonight, every gesture, every conversation, every dance would be scrutinized for meaning. Lord and Lady Blackmore of the Western Province, the steward announced. Lord Blackmore, a barrel-chested man with shrewd eyes, bowed deeply to Elara. Princess, your return brings hope to many who remember Avalonia's prosperity under your father's rule. You honor his memory with your words, Elara replied, noting how the man's declaration, bolder than previous nobles had dared, caused ripples of reaction among nearby listeners. Lady Alara's dance card appears quite full already, Edmund interjected smoothly, sensing the political current. Though I'm certain Lady Blackmore would welcome your company during the opening set. As the Blackmores moved on, Edmund spoke quietly. He tests the waters, seeing what he can say publicly without repercussion. Others will follow his lead, Alara observed. Your father can't silence everyone. The dance card hanging from Alara's wrist, an ornate ivory tablet with attached pencil, remained conspicuously empty. Protocol dictated nobles would request dances throughout the evening, the card recording their names and assigned sets. So far, most had kept a cautious distance, unwilling to publicly align with the Avalonian princess, despite private sympathies. Duke Harrington presided from his elevated seat, watching the proceedings with calculated interest. Beside him sat the newly arrived Avalonian delegation, 3 nobles who had pledged loyalty to Westmere after the coup in exchange for keeping their lands. Their presence tonight was deliberate, a show of Avalonian integration under Westmere rule. As the night progressed, the pattern of nobles either seeking or avoiding Alara became a visible map of political allegiances. Those who requested dances or engaged her in conversation signaled subtle support, while others ostentatiously maintained distance. Her dance card gradually filled, becoming a tangible record of shifting court dynamics. He watches you constantly, Lady Marianne murmured, appearing at Alara's side during a brief moment alone. My brother, I've never seen him so attentive to any woman. Alara glanced toward Edmund, deep in conversation with military advisors across the hall. Political necessity, nothing more. Is it? Marianne's smile was knowing. He defended you against our father, something I've never witnessed before. Edmund has always been duty incarnate. Before Alara could respond, Lord Chancellor Godwin approached, his thin lips pressed into what passed for a smile. Princess Alara, might I have the honor of the next dance? His voice carried just far enough for nearby nobles to hear the request. Alara hesitated, recognizing the trap. To refuse the Duke's right hand would be an insult. To accept meant enduring the company of the man who had advocated for her interrogation. Chancellor Godwin, Edmund's voice came from behind her as he returned to her side. I fear you'll have to find another partner. The next set is a traditional Avalonian circle dance, and my wife has promised to teach me the steps. Surprise flickered across Godwin's face. I was unaware such dances were included tonight. A recent addition, Edmund replied smoothly. In honor of our strengthened alliance through marriage. As Godwin withdrew, Alara turned to Edmund with a raised eyebrow. Avalonian circle dances require specific music our musicians likely don't know. Edmund's smile held unexpected mischief. Then we'd better inform them quickly. Moments later, to the astonishment of the court, the musicians began the distinctive rhythms of an Avalonian harvest dance. Edmund led Alara to the center of the floor, other couples reluctantly forming the circle around them. How did you arrange this? Alara whispered, as they took position. Your handmaid Margot was most instructive about the music. Roland handled the musicians. Edmund's hand settled at her waist. I thought it time Westmere remembered that Avalonia's culture wasn't erased by conquest. The dance began, complex and energetic compared to Westmere's stately patterns. Edmund followed Alara's lead with surprising grace, his military training evident in his precise movements. As the circle expanded to include more couples, Alara noticed something remarkable. Servants along the walls watching with undisguised pride, some discreetly mimicking the steps of their homeland's dance. Your father looks as though he's bitten into something sour, Alara observed, as they turned beneath joined hands. He's calculating whether to end the dance or endure it for appearance's sake. Edmund executed a particularly challenging turn. Politics governs even music in his mind. As the dance concluded, spontaneous applause erupted, not just from nobles but from servants and guards as well. The sound swelled, becoming something more significant than mere appreciation for a performance. Later, as Edmund escorted Alara to the refreshment table, Sir Roland approached urgently. My lord, a moment please. Edmund excused himself, the 2 men speaking in hushed tones nearby. Alara watched Edmund's expression darken before he returned to her side. We must speak privately. he said, his voice low. Come. He led her to a small antechamber off the main hall, closing the door against the music and laughter. What's happened? Elara asked. My father has been in secret correspondence with Lord Godwin and the border commanders. Edmund's face was grave. Roland discovered documents in my father's study. They're planning to use you to lure out Avalonian leadership, then crush the resistance permanently. Elara's blood chilled. A public declaration of your renunciation of the Avalonian throne, followed by your visible support for Westmere rule. Those who continue resistance would be branded traitors to your own wishes. I would never. They don't expect you to cooperate willingly. Edmund's voice hardened. Godwin has prepared some method to ensure your compliance, though the documents don't specify details. Understanding dawned. The dance request, he intended to speak with me privately. Most likely. Edmund ran a hand through his hair in frustration. We return to the ball as if nothing is amiss. But tonight we must decide our next move carefully. Laura studied him. Our next move. Yes. Edmund met her gaze directly. Whatever lies between our kingdoms, between our families, I will not be party to coercion and deception. They stood in silence, the weight of decision heavy between them. As music from the grand ball filtered through the door, festive sounds at odds with the dangerous reality taking shape around them. Dawn light filtered through the stained glass windows of Edmund's study as he examined the letter Roland had discovered. The parchment bore no seal or signature, but the handwriting was unmistakable. Lord Godwin's precise script, detailing guard rotations, security weaknesses, and most damning of all, the exact location where Elara took her daily walks. The assassination attempts, Edmund murmured. They weren't random. They were coordinated by someone within our walls. Elara stood beside him, her face pale but composed. Godwin has served your father faithfully for decades. Why would he undermine his own kingdom's stability? That's what I intend to discover. Edmund rolled the parchment carefully. Roland, has my father seen this letter? No, my lord. It was hidden among treasury documents I was reviewing on the Duke's behalf. Roland's expression was grim. There are others. Correspondence with someone identified only as the Sentinel. We must confront Godwin directly, Edmund decided, but discreetly without alerting my father until we understand the full scope of this betrayal. That opportunity may present itself sooner than expected. Roland handed Edmund another document. Lord Godwin has requested a private audience with Lady Elara this afternoon, ostensibly to discuss her household budget. Edmund's jaw tightened. Then we shall be prepared for him. Hours later, Elara sat alone in the solar adjoining their chambers, embroidery in hand as she awaited her visitor. Hidden behind a tapestry in the connecting room, Edmund and Roland waited, swords at the ready. The door opened precisely at the appointed hour. Lord Godwin entered, his thin frame cloaked in the dark robes of his office, a leather portfolio tucked under one arm. Princess Elara. He bowed stiffly. Thank you for agreeing to this meeting. Chancellor Godwin. Elara set aside her needlework. I understand you wish to discuss household matters. Indeed. He placed his portfolio on the table between them, though not precisely of the domestic variety. He withdrew, not budget ledgers, but a sealed letter bearing an unfamiliar crest. Do you recognize this seal, Your Highness? Elara examined it without touching the document. I do not. No. Godwin's smile was cold. How strange, considering it belongs to your most ardent supporter, Baron Kellor of the Northern Marches, a man who, according to Westmere records, perished in the coup 10 years ago. Elara's expression remained neutral despite the mention of her childhood friend and loyal captain. The dead seem to have a habit of reappearing in our kingdoms lately. Indeed they do. Godwin opened the letter. This correspondence was intercepted yesterday. Its contents are most illuminating. While Godwin focused on the document, Elara subtly shifted a small mirror on her sewing table, angling it toward the hidden doorway where Edmund waited. Their prearranged signal. Baron Kellar writes of troops assembling under the Avalonian royal banner. Godwin continued. He mentions a planned assault on Westmere Castle itself, guided by information from our friend at court. He looked up sharply. Would you care to explain how Avalonian rebels acquired detailed knowledge of our guard rotations and secret passages? Perhaps you should explain that, Lord Chancellor. Edmund's voice cut through the room as he emerged from his hiding place, the intercepted letter in his hand. Since the information matches precisely what you provided to someone called the Sentinel, Godwin's face drained of color. Lord Edmund, this is a private, treasonous conspiracies, forfeit all claims to privacy. Edmund advanced into the room, Roland flanking him with sword drawn. Did you think we wouldn't discover your betrayal? For a moment, Godwin seemed to deflate, his shoulders sagging with the weight of exposure. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed, a hollow sound devoid of humor. Betrayal? He straightened, dropping all pretense of deference. I have served Westmere faithfully for 30 years. Everything I've done has been to preserve our kingdom's strength. By orchestrating attacks on the Duke's own hunting party, Edmund challenged. By attempting to assassinate my wife, by preventing a disastrous union that threatens everything we've built. Godwin's careful composure cracked. Your father conquered Avalonia through strategic brilliance. Now he risks everything for the appearance of legitimacy through this marriage. Understanding dawned on Elara's face. You never wanted peace between our kingdoms. Peace. Godwin spat the word. There is no peace with conquered territories. Only submission or rebellion. Your existence, princess, gives hope to rebels. Hope leads to resistance. Resistance leads to war. And the Sentinel, Edmund pressed, who coordinates these efforts with you. Godwin's lips pressed into a thin line. Someone who understands that Westmere's strength lies in absolute authority, not compromise. Roland moved forward, sword still ready. Shall I arrest him, my lord? Before Edmund could answer, the study door burst open. Duke Harrington entered, flanked by his personal guards. That won't be necessary, the Duke said coldly. Lord Godwin acts under my direct authority. The revelation hung in the air like a physical presence. Edmund stared at his father, disbelief warring with emerging understanding. You ordered the attacks on your own hunting party. Edmund's voice was barely controlled. On your son and heir, I ordered a controlled demonstration of the dangers Avalonian sentiment poses. The Duke replied evenly. Godwin's execution was overzealous at times. You risked lives, our lives, to justify continued oppression of Avalonia. Edmund's hand moved to his sword hilt. The Duke's eyes flashed with warning. I secured our kingdom's future against rebellion. The appearance of danger allows us to move troops into position without alarming our allies. And my attempted assassination, Elara asked quietly, was that also part of your strategy? A regrettable necessity, Godwin interjected. Your death, properly attributed to Avalonian extremists, would have united Westmere against remaining resistance while making Lord Edmund an object of sympathy rather than suspicion for marrying the enemy. Edmund moved protectively toward Elara, his decision made in that moment. Guards, he commanded, arrest Lord Chancellor Godwin for treason against the crown. The Duke's eyebrows rose. Countermanding my authority, son. Protecting Westmere's honor, Edmund replied firmly. A kingdom that murders innocent women for political expediency has no honor worth defending. The guards hesitated, caught between contradictory orders from the two most powerful men in the kingdom. In the tense silence, Elara stepped forward. Perhaps, she suggested with quiet dignity, we should all consider what kingdom we wish to build from the ashes of this conflict. All eyes turned to her, as the fate of two kingdoms balanced on the edge of a sword. The tense standoff in the Solar had ended not with bloodshed, but with a temporary truce. Duke Harrington, ever the strategist, had recognized the dangerous fracturing of loyalty among the guards. Lord Godwin remained under house arrest, a compromise that satisfied no one but prevented immediate conflict. The Duke had retreated to his chambers, his authority visibly weakened but his power far from broken. Night had fallen by the time Edmund returned to their quarters, his face etched with exhaustion. Alara sat near the fire, her handmaid Margot quietly sorting through a cedar chest in the corner. "Leave us," Edmund ordered, not unkindly. Margot exchanged a meaningful glance with Alara before departing. Once the door closed, Edmund sank heavily into the chair opposite his wife. "My father has summoned the full council for tomorrow," he said without preamble. "He intends to present evidence of Avalonian aggression and call for a formal military response, using the intercepted letter as proof." Alara's voice was steady despite the implications. "Among other fabrications, I suspect." Edmund rubbed his temples. "Roland reports troop movements along all our borders. My father prepares for war while claiming to seek resolution. And what of us? Where do we stand in his plans?" Edmund met her gaze directly. "You are to publicly renounce your claim to Avalonia's throne at the council meeting. Any refusal will be taken as confirmation of your complicity with rebel forces." Alara's hands tightened in her lap, but her voice remained controlled. "And if I agree to this renunciation, then you become a valuable political puppet, paraded before the public, a symbol of Avalonian submission." Edmund's disgust was evident. "Your safety guaranteed only so long as your performance remains convincing." Silence fell between them, heavy with unspoken possibilities. Finally, Alara rose and moved to the cedar chest Margot had been tending. From its depths, she withdrew a bundle, wrapped in simple linen. "What is this?" Edmund asked as she placed it on the table between them. Alara unwrapped the bundle to reveal an assortment of items: plain woolen garments, a leather pouch containing various cosmetics and powders, scissors, hair dye, and several official-looking documents with different names. "A disguise kit," she explained, "prepared for me shortly after our wedding." Edmund examined the materials, comprehensive enough to transform a princess into someone entirely unremarkable. "You've been planning your escape since the beginning. I've been prepared for all possibilities," she corrected, as any ruler should be. Before Edmund could respond, a soft pattern of knocks sounded at the door. Alara wrapped the disguise kit quickly and returned it to the chest before calling, "Enter." Margot returned, accompanied by Lissa, the red-haired kitchen maid from Avalonia. Both women curtsied deeply. "Forgive the interruption, Your Highness," Margot said formally, "but there's news that couldn't wait." Lissa stepped forward, her voice barely above a whisper. "Baron Kellor sends word. 300 loyal soldiers have positioned themselves in the forest beyond the North Ridge. They await your signal to approach the tunnels beneath the castle." Edmund stared at the young maid. "Kellor survived the coup. He has served as captain of the princess's guard in exile these 10 years, my lord." Lissa's chin lifted slightly, pride evident in her voice. "Many thought to be dead have simply been waiting for the right moment to return." "When is this rescue planned?" Edmund asked, turning to Alara. "Tomorrow night," she admitted, "during the changing of the guard, when the castle is most vulnerable." Edmund paced the room, absorbing this information. "My father expects something like this. The guard rotations have been doubled, and he's stationed his most loyal men at every known entrance." "Known entrances, yes." Alara exchanged looks with her handmaid. "But there are passages even your father doesn't know exist. Royal secrets passed through generations." The weight of decision pressed upon them both. Edmund stopped pacing and faced Alara directly. "If you leave, my father will declare it treason and hunt you without mercy. The conflict between our kingdoms will escalate into open war." His voice softened unexpectedly. "Is that truly what you want?" "What I want," Alara replied carefully, "is justice for my people, freedom from oppression, the restoration of what was wrongfully taken." She hesitated before adding, "But I've come to question whether those goals require bloodshed." Edmund studied her for a long moment. Then, surprising them all, he moved to the disguise kit and examined its contents more thoroughly. "The plan is sound but flawed," he said finally. "The northern tunnel entrance has been compromised. My father stationed 10 guards there 3 days ago. Lyssa's face fell, but Elara remained thoughtful. You know this for certain. I saw the orders myself. Edmund sorted through the disguise items methodically. However, the western passage, through the old armory that remains unguarded, because my father believes it collapsed years ago. Hope flickered across Margot's face. It didn't collapse. It was deliberately sealed to appear so, but the passage remains intact. Edmund turned to Elara. With proper preparation, that route offers your best chance. The three women exchanged glances, the implication clear. Edmund was not opposing the escape, but improving its chances of success. Why would you help me flee? Elara asked directly. You owe me no loyalty. Edmund considered his answer carefully. I've spent my life believing that honor comes from unwavering duty to Westmere. Recent events have shown me that true honor may lie elsewhere, in standing against injustice, even when that injustice serves my family's interest. The room fell silent as the significance of his words settled upon them. Finally, Elara nodded to her handmaids. Leave us, make the necessary adjustments to our plans, but speak of this to no one. When they were alone again, Elara moved to stand before Edmund. You understand what this means? By helping me, you stand against your father and everything you've been raised to defend. I understand perfectly. His voice was steady, resolved. The question remains, when you escape these walls and rejoin your supporters, what then? Will you lead an army against Westmere? Against your husband? Their eyes met, the question hanging between them with all its complex implications. Elara reached out slowly, her fingers just brushing his. That, she said quietly, depends greatly on whether my husband stands with Westmere or with me. First light had barely crept above the castle walls when Edmund awoke, his mind already racing with the day's impossible decisions. The council meeting would begin at midday, a gathering that would either cement war between their kingdoms or offer a last chance at peace. Edmund dressed without summoning his valet, preferring solitude as he prepared for what lay ahead. On his writing desk sat two objects that symbolized his divided loyalties. The Westmere royal seal his father had entrusted to him years ago, and the Avalonian royal seal Elara had revealed to him the night before. A small token she had kept hidden through 10 years of exile. The two seals side by side represented kingdoms with intertwined histories far more complex than he had been raised to believe. His fingers traced the emblems, Westmere's soaring falcon and Avalonia's ancient oak, wondering if these symbols could ever exist in harmony again. A soft knock interrupted his contemplation. Sir Roland entered, his expression grave. The Duke has ordered the arrest of 3 Avalonian servants, he reported, including the princess's handmaid Margot. Edmund's jaw tightened. On what charges? Conspiracy against the crown. He claims they've been coordinating with forces outside the castle. Roland lowered his voice. The orders came directly from Lord Godwin, despite his house arrest. My father allows his pet snake to continue striking. Edmund reached for his sword belt. Where are they being held? The North Tower guard room. They're to be questioned before the council meeting. The implication hung unspoken between them. Questioning under Godwin's methods would yield whatever confessions the Duke desired, regardless of truth. Have my horse prepared, Edmund decided, and find Lady Elara. Tell her, he hesitated. Tell her it's time. Within the hour, Edmund had secured the release of the Avalonian servants into his personal custody, citing his authority as heir. The Duke, preoccupied with council preparations, had not yet challenged this assertion of power. It bought them precious time, nothing more. Elara waited in their chambers, already dressed in a simple riding habit, rather than her usual finery. Her face was calm but determined as Edmund entered. The plan must be accelerated, he told her without preamble. My father moves against your people more quickly than anticipated. She nodded, unsurprised. Margot and the others. Safe for now, but we can't delay. The western passage remains our best option. Edmund unfurled a small map of the castle grounds, marking their planned route. Roland has positioned trusted men at key points. They'll create a diversion near the east gate, while we make for the old armory." Elara studied the map, then looked up at him with a question in her eyes. "You said we. You intend to accompany me?" Edmund met her gaze steadily. "To ensure your safe passage, yes." "And after?" she pressed. "When I reach my supporters?" The question he had avoided since their midnight conversation could no longer be deferred. Edmund's hand moved unconsciously to the 2 royal seals he now carried in his pocket. "I cannot betray my kingdom," he said finally, "but neither can I support my father's tyranny." "A diplomatic answer," Elara observed, "but not a decision. The decision comes now." Edmund drew the seals from his pocket, holding one in each palm. "Westmere is my birthright. Avalonia is yours. For 10 years they have been enemies. Perhaps," he hesitated, "perhaps they need not remain so." Understanding dawned in Elara's eyes. "You propose an alliance? I propose a third path. Neither conquest nor separation, but partnership." Edmund placed both seals on the table between them. "This marriage, forced upon us both, could become a genuine union of our kingdoms, rather than a tool for subjugation." Elara's expression remained guarded. "And if your father opposes this vision, he cannot rule forever," Edmund said quietly, "and I have begun to question whether his legacy is one I wish to continue." The weight of his words, bordering on treason by Westmere law, hung between them. Then Elara did something unexpected. She took his hand, her fingers intertwining with his. "You risk everything for this ideal," she said softly. "Why?" Edmund's answer came more readily than he would have expected weeks earlier. "Because in these months with you, I've glimpsed a different kind of strength than my father taught me to value. Not the might that crushes opposition, but the wisdom that seeks to understand it." Footsteps in the corridor interrupted the moment. Roland appeared at the door, his expression urgent. "My lord, we must move now. The Duke has called for the princess's immediate appearance before the council." Edmund nodded, decision crystallizing. "Let's go." They moved swiftly through lesser-used corridors, Edmund leading while Roland guarded their rear. The old armory lay 3 levels below the main castle, accessible through a servant's stairway rarely traveled by nobility. Halfway down, Roland hissed a warning. Guards' voices echoed from below, drawing closer. Edmund pulled Elara into a shadowed alcove, pressing her against the wall as armored men passed within feet of their hiding place. "The passage has been discovered," Edmund whispered once the danger had passed. "We need another route." "The kitchens," Elara suggested. "There's a delivery entrance that connects to the lower tunnels." Edmund shook his head. "Too many eyes. My father will have every known exit watched." He thought for a moment, then reached a decision. "We make for the main gate." "The main gate?" Roland questioned. "It's the most heavily guarded point in the castle. Precisely why it's now our best option." Edmund's voice carried the confidence of a military commander. "They expect stealth and subterfuge. Instead, we'll ride out openly, as is my right as heir. And when they try to stop us?" Elara asked. Edmund's hand rested on his sword hilt. "Let us hope it doesn't come to that." As they changed direction, heading now toward the castle's main courtyard, Elara caught Edmund's arm. "Whatever happens," she said softly, "know that your choice today honors both our kingdoms more than 1,000 battles could." Their eyes met in silent understanding before they continued forward, 2 royal seals carried together as they moved toward a future neither could fully predict. The forest thickened around them as they rode northward, leaving the carefully cultivated lands of Westmere Castle for wilder terrain. Their escape had been both simpler and more complex than anticipated. Edmund's authority as heir had indeed granted them passage through the main gate, but the alarm had been raised within minutes. Only Roland's diversionary tactics and their swift horses had allowed them to evade pursuit. Now 3 days into their journey, they approached the encampment of Avalonian loyalists. Edmund had exchanged his nobleman's attire for a plain brown cloak over simple riding clothes. a commoner's garb that felt strangely liberating after a lifetime of ceremonial dress. The rough wool settled on his shoulders like the weight of his decision. "We'll be there by nightfall," Alara said, guiding her horse alongside his. "Are you certain about this? There's still time to return." Edmund shook his head. "My father will view my departure as betrayal regardless. Better to move forward than retreat into certain punishment." As dusk fell, they crested a wooded hill to find a valley below dotted with campfires, hundreds of them, far more than Edmund had expected. Tents spread across the clearing, and figures moved purposefully between them. "Your army grows impressive," Edmund observed, his military training automatically assessing their strength. "Not an army," Alara corrected. "A community. Many are families, farmers, craftspeople, scholars, who fled Westmere rule to preserve Avalonian traditions." They rode down into the valley, immediately drawing attention. Armed guards moved to intercept them, recognition dawning as Alara pushed back her hood. "Princess." A tall man with a weathered face and captain's insignia stepped forward, dropping to one knee. "We received word of your escape, but feared the worst when you didn't arrive yesterday. We took a longer route to avoid patrols." "Kellar." Alara dismounted, embracing her old friend. Baron Kellar's eyes fixed on Edmund with immediate suspicion. "And you bring the Westmere heir to our sanctuary?" "Your Highness, this risks everything we've built." "Lord Edmund comes as ally, not enemy," Alara assured him, though murmurs of disbelief spread through the gathering crowd. "The son of our oppressor walks freely among us." An elderly woman pushed forward, her Avalonian accent thick. "The same noble blood that ordered my son's execution now expects welcome." Other voices joined hers, a decade of grievances finding voice. Edmund remained mounted, accepting their anger without defense. These were not the simplified, ungrateful rebels his father had described, but people with legitimate wounds inflicted by his family's rule. "Enough." Alara's voice cut through the growing discord. "Lord Edmund risked everything to ensure my safe return. He will be treated with respect while among us." Kellar gestured to a nearby tent. "We've prepared your quarters, Your Highness. The Council awaits your guidance on our next actions." "Lord Edmund will join us," Alara stated firmly, meeting Kellar's surprise with unwavering resolve. As they moved through the encampment, Edmund observed details his military training had taught him to notice. The organization of tents, the quality of weapons, the discipline evident even in this civilian-heavy gathering. But he also saw elements no military assessment would capture. Children playing despite displacement, communal cooking fires where stories were shared, and makeshift schools where Avalonian history and language were taught in hushed tones. "Your people preserved more than I expected," Edmund commented as they reached the central gathering area. "My father believed he'd erased Avalonian culture from all but memory. Culture lives in people, not places." Alara replied, "It cannot be conquered if those who carry it survive." Inside the council tent, a dozen men and women of varying ages awaited them around a rough wooden table. Their expressions ranged from hostile to curious as Edmund entered behind Alara. His fine-featured face and military bearing marked him unmistakably as nobility, despite his common clothing. "Your Highness," an elderly man with a scholar's ink-stained fingers bowed to Alara. "The news of your marriage traveled quickly. We did not expect your husband to accompany your return." "Lord Edmund has proposed an alliance between our kingdoms," Alara explained, "one based on partnership rather than conquest." Skeptical glances passed between council members. "And how does the heir of Westmere imagine this partnership?" Kellar asked, making no effort to hide his distrust. Edmund stepped forward. "I cannot change the past actions of my family, but I can offer a different future, one where Avalonia regains its sovereignty while maintaining peaceful relations with Westmere." "Pretty words," a hard-faced woman commented, "but Westmere has never honored treaties with those it considers beneath them." "I am not my father," Edmund replied evenly. "Prove it," challenged a younger man. "If you truly stand with Avalonia, help us reclaim what was stolen." Edmund looked at the faces surrounding him, people who had suffered under his family's rule, whose lives had been upended by policies he had never questioned until recently. "I will," he said simply. Beginning now, over the following days, Edmund immersed himself in Avalonian life. He traded his remaining fine clothes for the simple garments of the camp, working alongside refugees to build shelters and reinforce defenses. The commoner's cloak he'd worn during their escape became his daily attire, a physical reminder of his choice to step away from privilege. Initially met with suspicion, his willingness to perform manual labor gradually earned reluctant respect. He carried water, chopped firewood, and assisted the camp's blacksmith tasks no nobleman of Westmere would deign to perform. At night, around community fires, he listened to stories of the coup and its aftermath. Tales of homes confiscated, traditions forbidden, families separated, each narrative adding dimension to a history he'd been taught from only one perspective. "You split wood like you're still angry at the tree, Kellor," commented one afternoon, finding Edmund at the edge of camp with an axe. "Your form needs work." Edmund wiped sweat from his brow. Military training didn't include much forestry. "No, I imagine it focused on more destructive skills." Kellor demonstrated the proper technique. "The axe does the work if you guide it correctly. Force alone accomplishes little." The lesson, Edmund realized, extended beyond woodcutting. His upbringing had emphasized dominance and control. Here he was learning cooperation and adaptation. Later, as Edmund carried water from the stream, the elderly woman who had confronted him upon arrival stepped into his path. "You have noble hands," she observed, studying his blistered palms. "Not made for common work." "They're learning," Edmund replied. She nodded slowly. "As perhaps are you." From her pocket she produced a small jar of salve. "For the blisters. Even a changing man needs hands that can hold a sword when necessary." It was the first gesture of acceptance he'd received beyond Ilara's circle. Edmund accepted the offering with genuine gratitude, recognizing it represented something more significant than mere medicine. That evening, as he joined the council's strategy discussion, Edmund no longer felt entirely an outsider. The simple cloak around his shoulders had begun to feel less like a disguise and more like a choice, one that opened doors to understanding his noble garments had always kept firmly shut. 2 weeks had transformed the Avalonian camp into a formidable force. Daily more supporters arrived, displaced nobles reclaiming their heritage, common folk bringing skills and supplies, even defectors from Westmere's border garrisons seeking a more just cause. Reports indicated Duke Harrington had mobilized his armies but hesitated to attack, uncertain of his son's status as hostage or traitor. In the command tent, Edmund leaned over maps spread across a wooden table, Ilara and Kellor at his side. Their strategy had evolved beyond simple military engagement to something more nuanced. "My father expects a direct assault on the eastern garrison," Edmund explained. "His forces are concentrated there, leaving the western approach to the castle vulnerable." "Yet you recommend against attacking either position," Kellor observed, skepticism evident. "I recommend presenting an alternative to battle entirely." Edmund straightened, revealing a different document, a formal peace proposal written on parchment bearing both Westmere and Avalonian royal seals. The proposal detailed a new vision, Avalonia restored as a sovereign kingdom under Ilara's rule, with trade agreements and mutual defense pacts with Westmere. The marriage between Edmund and Ilara would serve as the foundation for lasting alliance, rather than subjugation. "My father will never accept these terms," Edmund acknowledged. "But this isn't for him alone, it's for the council members, the noble houses, the military commanders, those who recognize endless conflict benefits no one." "A pretty document," Kellor said, "but words alone won't reclaim our homeland." "No," Ilara agreed, "which is why we deliver it ourselves in person, with our forces positioned strategically to demonstrate our strength without initiating bloodshed." The boldness of their plans stirred murmurs among the gathered advisors. To march on Westmere Castle, not for battle but for negotiation, required extraordinary courage and precise timing. Dawn broke clear and cold as the Avalonian procession approached Westmere Castle. At their head rode Alara and Edmund, side by side beneath banners of both kingdoms. Behind them came not an army and battle formation, but a delegation representing every facet of Avalonian society: nobles, scholars, craftspeople, farmers, flanked by a disciplined honor guard. Word of their approach had preceded them. The castle gates remained closed, but the ramparts teemed with soldiers and nobles, straining for glimpses of the returned princess and the duke's son. A small party rode out to meet them, led by Sir Roland, who had maintained his position in the castle while secretly supporting their cause, and Lady Marianne, Edmund's sister. Brother Marianne's relief was evident, despite the formal setting. "Father has agreed to receive you in the Great Hall, though not without considerable persuasion. And our delegation," Edmund asked. "A limited number may accompany you. The rest must remain outside the walls." Edmund exchanged glances with Alara. They had anticipated this restriction. 10 representatives will join us, Alara decided. The remainder will make camp within sight of the castle, a reminder of our strength without implied threat. As they approached the massive gates, Edmund felt the weight of countless eyes upon them. Whispers spread through the gathered crowd, some hostile, others curious, a few hopeful. The common folk of Westmere had suffered too beneath the Duke's increasingly harsh rule. The great hall fell silent as Edmund and Alara entered, their chosen delegates following closely. Duke Harrington sat upon his throne-like chair on the dais, Lord Godwin and key nobles flanking him. His expression betrayed nothing as his son approached. "So," the Duke's voice carried throughout the hall, "the heir of Westmere returns, leading those who would overthrow his own father." Edmund stood tall before the man who had shaped his understanding of power and duty. "I return seeking to prevent needless bloodshed and forge a lasting peace." "Peace?" Lord Godwin scoffed. "You abandoned your position, your duty, your blood." "Silence," the Duke commanded. His cold gaze shifted to Alara. "And you, Princess, think to reclaim your father's throne through manipulation of my son." "I think to restore justice to both our kingdoms," Alara replied with quiet dignity. "Something lost since your armies brought fire to my home a decade ago." Edmund stepped forward, producing the formal document they had prepared. "We bring a proposal for alliance, not surrender. Avalonia restored as sovereign under its rightful queen, with mutual agreements benefiting both our peoples." The Duke didn't reach for the document. "And why would I consider such terms when my armies could crush your ragtag forces?" "Because war brings destruction to both sides," Edmund answered. "Because our ragtag forces grow stronger daily as your support weakens. Because history will judge how we resolve this conflict." He paused, then added words he had never before spoken to his father. "And because it is the right thing to do." Murmurs spread through the assembled nobles. The Duke's face darkened at this challenge before his court. "You presume to lecture me on right and wrong. I, who built Westmere into the greatest power in the region, who secured our borders and prosperity. At what cost?" Edmund countered. "Fear is not respect. Submission is not loyalty. I've seen what you dismissively call peasants build in adversity: community, resilience, mutual support. There is strength there that all your military might cannot match." The Duke rose from his chair, anger finally breaking through his controlled facade. "You speak of things you cannot understand. Leadership requires hard choices, sacrifices for the greater good." "Whose greater good?" Edmund challenged. "I've walked among those sacrificed for Westmere's greatness. Their suffering isn't an acceptable price, it's a failure of governance." A tense silence fell over the hall. The confrontation had moved beyond political negotiation to a fundamental questioning of values that had guided Westmere for generations. Lady Beatrice, who had remained silent, suddenly stepped forward. "Perhaps," she said thoughtfully, "we should examine this proposal before dismissing it. After all, continuous conflict drains our treasury and tests our allies' patience." Other council members nodded, sensing shifting winds. The Duke, isolated in his intransigence, surveyed the room with narrowed eyes. "You are all too young to remember," he said finally. "Before my father secured our borders, Westmere suffered constant raids and encroachment. Strength was the only language our neighbors respected. Times change, father," Edmund replied. "We can remain anchored to old grievances, or we can build something new." He placed the peace proposal on the council table, the dual seals prominently displayed, a physical manifestation of the union he and Alara now embodied. "I ask that you read this, not as Duke to rebel, but as father to son, as one ruler to another, who understands the true weight of leadership." The hall held its breath as Duke Harrington stared at the document, decades of conviction warring with the undeniable reality before him. Spring blossoms drifted like snow across the Grand Plaza, where once two separate kingdoms had conducted tense trade negotiations. Now, citizens from both Westmere and Avalonia gathered beneath a cloudless sky, their former divisions fading like winter frost in morning sun. 1 year had passed since the confrontation in the Great Hall, a year of difficult negotiations, stubborn resistance, and gradual change. Duke Harrington had not surrendered his convictions easily, but faced with growing support for Edmund and Alara's vision, he had ultimately chosen pragmatism over pride. Though he maintained his title, real power had shifted to the younger generation and their promise of a united future. At the center of the plaza stood a newly constructed platform where Edmund and Alara waited, dressed in ceremonial attire that honored both their traditions. Avalonian blue intertwined with Westmere crimson in the intricate embroidery of their garments. Between them rested a unique creation, a single crown forged from metals of both kingdoms, ancient symbols merged into a new emblem of shared governance. "Nervous?" Edmund asked quietly, noticing Alara's fingers lightly tracing the scar on her palm, a habit from her years in hiding. "Expectant," she corrected with a smile. "Today we transform what began as deception into truth." The assembled crowd fell silent as Baron Kellor approached, accompanied by Lady Beatrice. Together they represented the old guards of both kingdoms, their unlikely alliance a powerful symbol of reconciliation. "Citizens of Westmere and Avalonia," Kellor's voice carried across the plaza, "we gather to witness the formal union of our lands, not through conquest but through vision and choice." Lady Beatrice continued, "For generations our peoples have seen each other as enemies, forgetting the centuries of friendship that preceded our conflict. Today we reclaim that older, wiser history." From the crowd, Edmund spotted his father watching with complex emotions evident on his face. The Duke had aged visibly this past year, the transition of power taking its toll. Yet there was something else in his expression too. A reluctant recognition that his son had found a different kind of strength than the one he had taught. Nearby stood Sir Roland with Marianne, whose diplomatic skills had proven invaluable during negotiations. Other familiar faces dotted the gathering, the elderly Avalonian woman who had first challenged Edmund in the refugee camp, now serving on the joint council, the village elder from Oakenvale, who had sheltered Alara during her years in hiding, servants and nobles, whose lives had been transformed by the changes sweeping both kingdoms. A reverent hush fell as Kellor lifted the united crown, its metals gleaming in the spring sunlight. "With this crown, forged from the royal treasuries of both our lands, we symbolize not merely a political alliance, but the birth of a new identity, neither fully Westmere nor fully Avalonia, but something greater than either alone." Edmund and Alara knelt as the crown was held above them. The weight of history, both painful and promising, pressed upon them as heavily as any royal symbol. "Do Lord Edmund of Westmere pledge to uphold the principles of justice, compassion, and wisdom in your governance, to honor the traditions of both kingdoms, while fostering innovation and growth?" "I do so pledge," Edmund responded, his voice carrying the conviction born from his journey. "And do you, Princess Alara of Avalonia, pledge to lead with both strength and mercy, to honor the sacrifices made by your people, while embracing reconciliation and healing?" "I do so pledge," she answered. the years of exile evident in her unwavering tone. Together they reached for the crown, placing it between them on a ceremonial pillow rather than upon either head, a gesture marking their commitment to shared rule rather than individual authority. Rising, they turned to address their people. A marriage that began as political strategy, Edmund began, has taught me that true power lies not in domination but in partnership. And a princess who returned seeking justice, Elara continued, discovered that healing requires both truth and forgiveness. Their hands joined as they spoke the final words in unison. We stand before you not as conqueror and conquered, nor as noble and peasant, but as equals committed to building a kingdom worthy of your trust. Cheers erupted across the plaza, blossoming like the spring flowers that adorned every building. From her position near the platform, Margot wiped tears from her eyes, remembering the frightened princess she had helped disguise for the wedding that now seemed a lifetime ago. Later, as celebrations continued throughout the city, Edmund and Elara retreated briefly to a quiet garden. The crown rested on a table between them, its unified design catching the evening light. Not quite the outcome either of us envisioned when we spoke our first vows, Edmund observed. Elara's smile held both wisdom and warmth. The best journeys often lead to unexpected destinations. Indeed, he took her hand, his thumb brushing over her wedding ring. Though I wonder, had you known on our wedding day where this path would lead, would you still have chosen it? Her answer came without hesitation. 1,000 times yes, though perhaps with slightly less deception at the start. Their laughter mingled in the garden air as beyond the walls, two peoples began the long, hopeful work of becoming one.